Hello, BookTube. We're continuing my library tour for 2024. God help us all. We are on bookcase number 3, shelf number 2, subsection B. We're still dealing only with mass market paperbacks. They extend to the sky. So let's take a look at what we have this time around. I don't think there are any blocks. Blocks have been helping us to get through these in less than 40 minutes apiece, but I don't think there are any this time. Here we have Edison Marshall, Yankee Pasha. His most popular book, he's now completely forgotten, but this was his most popular and most reprinted novel. It was a terrific historical adventure novelist. Really, I found a few of his books in the last year or so and had a chance to revisit them, and they're really quite good. Really, really solidly made. Okay, all right, one of you actually brought this up. Because we've reached the point where you know my library better than I do. I mentioned earlier in this library tour, we came across a novel by Lester Del Rey. I said I didn't think I had any other Lester Del Rey, and one of you reminded me that I have this, the early Del Rey, a collection of early science fiction and fantasy and quasi-fantasy horror stories by Lester Del Rey. So I do have more Lester Del Rey. I don't know that I have any more than this. This and the one novel about the church. And that, as I've mentioned, that weird science fiction contraption on the cover there is a typewriter. It's not actually science fiction at all. I know how to take one apart and put it back together blindfolded. Then we have Nicholas Montserrat. We are doing a read-along right now, as this library tour will exist in a playlist, I would imagine. But right now, contemporaneously on my channel, I am doing a read-along of The Cruel Sea by Nicholas Montserrat, which is his most famous novel. But here is a little thing, HMS Marlborough Will Enter Harbor. Tiny little novella that's really, really striking. Really, really well done. About a stricken ship, about a ship that... Are you going to limp home, or are you going to sink? Which is it going to be? Then we have Graham Diamond. I've put two of these together. This is Samarkand. We've already seen this guy. He did a Sinbad novel. Yes, he did a Sinbad novel that we've seen. God only knows where it is. But I think we saw something of his already. This is high fantasy, but it's very based in a very recognizable world. A world very similar to Earth. And this is Samarkand Dawn. I think there was one other Samarkand novel that I have not been able to find. It will turn up. It will turn up at the Brattle Bookshop. Okay, then we have a Viking Portable Edition. We saw a Viking Portable edition of Prescott. I'm hoping I set that aside somewhere. This is the Viking Portable Hacklet. Hacklet's Voyages is a fantastic book that not enough people know. There was, anyway, once upon a time, a Penguin Classic of it. This is a Viking Portable of it. It has a terrific introduction, and it picks and chooses. There's quite a bit of Hacklet's Voyages that is just, today the winds were south by southwest, and so on and so forth. It was polished. It was rewritten and shaped and polished for a popular audience. But even so, a portable edition isn't a bad idea. And this one is, I never see it at all anywhere, so I grabbed it when I did. Then we have Michael Schauer, a Timescape book by Michael Schauer. This is, he is the author of The Killer Angels, a historical novel about the Battle of Gettysburg. That is his great book. This is a collection of science fiction stories called Soldier Boy, with a Rowena cover and the Timescape logo and all that. I remember when this first came out. This came out in the late 1970s? 1982. I remember when this came out, later on, in later years, when I looked back on this author and his work, I thought, what a great service it would have been to the reading world just in general if the editors at Timescape had finagled a deal to print The Killer Angels in a Timescape paperback. There's nothing about Timescape that guarantees, that promises by force of law that it will be science fiction or fantasy. And imagine how many readers you would have made of both historical fiction and then history if you'd done that, as opposed to making them look elsewhere in the bookstore or on the spinner rack. But Michael Schauer is a good writer anyway. You've got Soldier Boy. You've also got Thrill of the Grass, a baseball collection of his that's also quite effective. Nothing anywhere near as good as The Killer Angel. Michael Schauer is a really good example of the thing that I often mention on this channel, which is people having basically one great book in them. the standard rubric of the writing advice world is that everybody's got a book in them. And an old friend of mine used to say, yes, and that's precisely where it should stay. But even if it's true, it's very doubtful that everybody has a lifetime of books in them. That's very, very doubtful. But anyway, then we have Spider Robinson, Callahan's Cross Time Saloon, this old paperback. I saw it and had to get it. It's good, entertaining science fiction stuff. We have Lawrence Watt Evans with A Single Spell, with a terrific old cover there. This is high fantasy, but it's fantasy in a kind of what is even a good example? John Jakes could write fantasy like this. Actually, Gardner Dozois could write fantasy like this. It's whimsical fantasy. It's meant as, it has a dramatic punch at the end, but it's meant to be mostly whimsical, to be mostly fun, lighthearted. It's not grimdark. It's not whatever the aberration that grimdark is. It's the exact opposite of that. Maybe not as frivolous as the Xanth books of Piers Anthony, but still very enjoyable. About a wizard who knows only one spell. Then we have God's Fire by Cynthia Felice. So we have hit a vein here of science fiction and fantasy that I mean to do something with. I am going to take bookcase number 2 that we saw. I'm going to take bookcase number 2 and convert it entirely to science fiction and fantasy. So I'm going to take, once I'm done with bookcase number 3 here, I'm going to take everything off bookcase number 2 and fill it with science fiction and fantasy. I'm hoping that the science fiction and fantasy mass market paperbacks double stacked will fill the first 4 shelves, leaving the top open. And if that's true, I will fill the top with all the science fiction and fantasy from elsewhere, all the trade paperbacks and hardcovers. I don't know what that'll do to the library tour. I guess maybe I have to wait until I'm done with the whole thing. We're all going to die of old age before that happens. But anyway, let's just move on here. We have Lynn Carter, Down to a Sunless Sea, just the classic, cheesy. This is what, Fawcett? Daw. Yeah, this should be a Daw Yellow Spine mass market paperback. Just classic, cheesy fantasy. Okay, then we have Alfred Koppel. This is Glory. This is, I believe, our current censorious age would refer to some parts of this as problematic, but I thought this was really, really good. Science fiction, really good. And I found this one, Glory, which is the first book in a series, but I did not find the others. I have yet to find, I think there are 2 others in the series. I haven't found them yet, but they'll turn up. Then we have Walter John Williams. This is Night Moves, collection of short stories, and one story in here that's a little longer than that. These are set in a future world in which mythological creatures have begun to creep back in around the margins. Very good stuff. He's really, really good. Wish I had more of him in old paperbacks. I never see. Night Moves is the only one I ever see. So, okay, all right. We have the old Bantam classic of the Complete Sherlock Holmes. This is volume 2 of the Complete Sherlock Holmes, with an introduction by Lauren Esselman in which he sticks up for Dr. Watson. What this is doing down here with all this science fiction and fantasy, I do not know. Especially since I'm sure there is Holmes elsewhere on this bookcase. Well, anyway, I'll sort it all out. We have a battered Penguin mass market paperback of The Natural History of Selborne by Gilbert White. Just a very unassuming book that you would not think would ever be a classic, much less the classic on the scale that it is. This thing has been reprinted more than almost any other book in the English language. It has, to call it perennially popular is a gigantic understatement. It's been a byword in the UK, just a byword. Houses that don't have, the stereotypical houses that didn't have more than 3 books had this. And it's just a guy noting the natural world in his calm little country lane. That's all he does, is note the natural world. But it is so good. I can attest. It has that weird cachet, not accidentally. It is really, really good. It will cast a spell over you. Okay, then we have a little slipcase thing. We saw this just recently. This is the Courtier's Library. John Donne. A little hardcover in a slipcase. Look at that! I did it. Just a tiny little thing there that really doesn't belong here with the rest of these things. Oh goodness! All right. Well, this shelf is going to descend into chaos. And this is Ever Since Darwin, collection of little essays by Stephen Jay Gould that he did for Natural History magazine. These are essays about Darwin and about oddities of history and oddities of paleontology and whatnot, and also essentially about evolution, about not just Darwin's core theory of evolution by means of natural selection, but everything that's happened to it since. How that theory, that core theory, has been expanded and tested and shock-proofed, and the people who've done it, and the stories that undergird that. Just terrific stuff. Just terrific stuff. And it was ever since Darwin that really kicked him off with these little Norton paperbacks. Really, really kicked him off. Stephen Jay Gould, of course, is no longer with us. So he's not alive to see that all of his labors were in vain. 2/3 of the United States adult population does not believe that evolution happens. They don't believe in the basis of biology. 2/3, at least 2/3, think that life was created by magic. By the goblin of their choosing, of course. Never by anybody else's goblin, just by theirs. Okay, then we have an everyman's library of, who is this? This is the collected works of Horace. Translated by Lord Dunsany, we've seen already on this library tour. He's a fantasy writer. He had help, yes? Michael Oakley translated these, helped him to translate these. And that's all that this is. It's just all of Horace in one volume, translated by a great writer. Okay, all right. This is a little odd. This is a little notebook. It's a little Superman notebook. It doesn't belong with the books. There's nothing in it. It's blank. I'm sure that I got it only because it has a hologram on the cover. I'm sure that's the reason that I got this. Can I make it? Superman is changing. If you turn it to the light, he is changing into Clark Kent. And it's just blank with Superman illustrations on the pages like that. I should set this aside because I'm obviously not going to put it back with the books. Okay, then we have a classic. This should not be out here. Absolutely should not be out here. This is David Slavitt's translation of La Vida Nuova, by Dante. It's an elegant little thing. This is Harvard University Press. Is this Belknap? I don't think I ever got a finished copy of this. In fact, I'm certain that I didn't. I never got a finished copy of this. And this has the pub sheet in it still. Goodness gracious. When did this come out? 2010. This is a book about love, a treatise on literary criticism, a window into Florentine civic life, a precursor to the Divine Comedy. Okay. Okay. I have the pub sheet in there. That was long before we were talking to each other. It shouldn't be here. I have a bookcase for classics, so we're going to set that aside. That should not even be in the mix. Okay, then we have an old guidebook. How old are you? 1898. Over a century. This is Boston and Environs. And there is the State House on the cover there with its gold-gilded dome, because no matter how else the rest of Boston changes, that is going to stay the same. This is wonderful to go through, these old Boston guidebooks. Oh, look at that. I opened it just at random to the Boston Public Library. Those are the gigantic lions that flank the staircase of the main entry of the old building of the Boston Public Library. You go up these stairs, either over there or over here, and you hit a landing right here. And through that doorway, and then through this opening here and the opening over here, you can walk around that middle wall to Bates Hall, which is one of my favorite places in the whole world. You have to go past those lions to get there. And this is just full of old pictures like that of Boston environs that are very different. Some of them are very different today. It's always neat when you get a guidebook like that to try and find your own neighborhood and see how it's changed, see what's different about it. Okay, then we have a work of nonfiction by Daphne du Maurier. All of you will know Daphne du Maurier for Rebecca, but this is her book, The Infernal World of Branwell Bronte, about the lost Bronte sibling. The three sisters wrote books, all of which are immortal. And the brother didn't. The brother drank himself to death. Or who knows. If he had received, I'm not sure that it's possible, Certainly, if you read this book, you'll believe that it wasn't possible. But if somehow Branwell had received help of some kind to stop a downward spiral of addiction and a pretty obvious self-contempt. I mean, the sisters weren't in love with themselves either, but nevertheless, all of the curses that floated around the Bronte family out there on the moor concentrated on the shoulders of this one young man. And if that hadn't happened, you always wonder, what might he have done? What might he have written? We'll never know, of course. I love to fantasize about it. This is a terrific book. Branwell's had a couple of good books, but Daphne du Maurier really isn't to be underestimated. Okay, then we have Elsbreg de Camp. This is Lest Darkness Fall. Look at that, an old Del Rey paperback of Lest Darkness Fall, where you've got a Roman siege weapon there, but you've got a guy in a suit and tie directing and that is exactly what happens here. A guy from the modern world goes back in time to ancient Rome and wonders how he can affect things with just the knowledge that he has in his head, without no way to bring a specialist along and no way to learn any specialist material, but you're there. It's delightful. It's funny too. There's a funny element that runs through all. Then we have mass market paperback of Edmund Wilson. This is his collection, The 20s. Just long occasional pieces, but that undersells Edmund Wilson, who's so great. He's fantastic. So a book of his occasional pieces is still going to be incredible. I don't know if a tour of the table of contents will really help us here. Let's take a look and see if we... No, this isn't really going to help at all. But I can't recommend Edmund Wilson high enough. The 20s comes in this little paperback. I don't think any of his others do. He did the 20s, he did the 30s, he did the 40s, he did the 50s. I don't think any of the rest of his come this way. Maybe Classics and Commercials does. But the Library of America makes a couple of volumes of him, and the squat little hardcovers, which I'm sure will turn up on this library tour, they're everywhere at used bookstores. If you haven't given Edmund Wilson a try, I strongly urge you to. What is next here? Oh, okay. This is Edith Hamilton's Mythology. Certainly needs no introduction, even a century after it appeared. It needs no introduction. This is Edith Hamilton writing about Greek myths, telling you about them, telling you what they are, telling you where we learn most of what we know about them, lightly retelling them herself. Just a wonderful, wonderful introduction to Greek mythology for people who don't know it and maybe find it a little bit intimidating. It's just a wonderful introduction to all that. And this, I don't think the current reprints of Edith Hamilton have the illustrations. The illustrations are by somebody going under the name of Steele Savage. There is The Rape of Europa. They are full-page things. They are utterly inimitable. They have Pygmalion and Galatea. He carves her so faithfully that she comes to life. I don't think that the new... Oh, look at that. Look at that. There's Bellerophon mounted on the winged horse Pegasus. Look at that. Fantastic. I don't think the recent editions of Edith Hamilton have these Savage Steele, or Steele Savage, or whatever his name is, these illustrations. That would be a shame. And one way that I always recommended this book when I had classes, when I was teaching, was for its chapters on the Trojan War. It was a big way that I recommended it. Where I would tell people, I would tell students, well, it isn't part of your curriculum. I'm not authorized, actually, to require you any more books than I already have. And requiring you to take on the Iliad is a big requirement. I'm not heartless. But if you want, I will take you to the bookstore and we'll buy a copy of Edith Hamilton's Mythology, just a little paperback for you. Read the chapters on the Trojan War. Read the chapters that Edith Hamilton tells about this story before you try the Iliad itself. Why go in raw and cold and ignorant of the subject matter when that's only going to hamper your reading experience? So I would often tell them to do that. Here we have The Judgment of Paris, where the three major goddesses go to Paris to ask him who is the fairest, because there's a golden apple that is inscribed to the fairest. And for some reason, these otherworldly beings are greedy for a golden apple. What are they going to do with it? Fence it in the market in Athens? I have no idea. But they go to Paris to ask him to judge between the three of them. And I always, friends of mine used to send me copies of that picture, and also there's a famous painting. And people send me postcards and copies of that sort of thing, because a handful of my friends read Troy War, a novel that I wrote about the Trojan War. And I have, I'm sorry, I have a chapter on the Judgment of Paris. I wrote a version of the Judgment of Paris myself, and to put it mildly, it's not like that picture. It's not like any picture. I went at the Judgment of Paris by, okay, Juno, who's the queen of heaven, Minerva, who's the goddess of war, and Venus, who's the goddess of love, and is obviously the prettiest of the three. They come to you as a shepherd in a field and say, please tell us, who's the prettiest among us? The very last person you're going to pick is going to be Venus, who can't do you any harm at all. You are not going to choose against the goddess of war. You certainly aren't going to say to the queen of heaven, no, I'm afraid not. And I came at the Judgment of Paris from that angle. What would those goddesses do? What would Juno do if you told her she wasn't the prettiest person in the world? And how long would it go on before you died? Sorry, Edith Hamilton's chapters on the Trojan War are well worth reading. She has an elegant prose line anyway, but they're well worth reading if you are intimidated by the Iliad itself. You shouldn't be. The Iliad, it is intimidating. It's 2,000 years old. It starts famously in Medias Res. It does not explain itself. You need to do a lot of catch-up work. I am here to tell you it is worth the catch-up work to do. It is incredibly powerful as a book. But there's no badge of honor in making that catch-up work harder. There's no badge of honor at all in that. Do not listen to the beard-stroking dude bros who say the only legitimate way to do that catch-up work is to teach yourself ancient Greek. That's ridiculous. Find a nice version. Find the chapters by Edith Hamilton. Read them and reread them until you understand the basics of the story. So that when the Iliad picks up years into the story and doesn't bother to stop to explain who anyone is, you are fine. Anyway, let's move on here. Oh, all right. Okay, this is a double. We've seen this already. This is Keith Laumer. This is Retief at Large, a collection of short stories about the two-fisted diplomat, Retief, who is part of a diplomatic corps, but he often likes to settle diplomatic quabbles with his fists or his ray gun. And then we have Cyril Judd wrote this book. That was a pen name for C.M. Cornbooth and Judith Merrill. And they wrote Gunnercade, which is, I think, the most popular, or maybe certainly the most reprinted thing that either one of them did, I think. I don't know. Maybe Judith Merrill not. But they wrote this together. And they will have you believe, if you talk to them at conventions or read interviews and whatnot, they would have you believe that the workload was fairly even. And who am I to blow that apart? Let's see here. Oh, all right. Now we've definitely seen this before. This is another copy of the best of Cordwainer Smith. This series. It doesn't quite have the exact same look to it, but we've encountered this before. I bet I could put my hand on it. And this is just a collection of the great stories of Cordwainer Smith. Unfortunately, they aren't unlimited. It doesn't take much of a book to put them all together. That's a shame. We've seen some. Yeah, here we go. This is a Cordwainer Smith collection too, but it's not everything. This is by far the best anthology. This has all of the great stories. It's starting with Scanners Live in Vain, but Alpha Ralpha Boulevard and The Lost Lady of Samel and whatnot. They're all in here, and they're all fantastic in their own way. They're all fantastic. I heard something fall. Oh, okay. All right, this is another Mary Stewart. I think we've seen this already. Need to find her and put them all together. This is Madam, Will You Talk? Mary Stewart paperback. I think we saw this exact same thing. Gothic fiction, quite enjoyable. Then John Ford, not that John Ford, not my John Ford, David Murphy's John Ford, but this is Growing Up Weightless. Science fiction novel, quite good. John Ford is a very good author, well worth finding. We have John Harris, Without Trace, The Last Voyages of 8 Ships. This is not fiction at all. So sooner or later, somewhere down the line, it belongs in a different section, not here. Because, well, I don't know what's going to happen to this bookcase. This bookcase here is going to be all science fiction and fantasy. So none of this history stuff or anything like that's going elsewhere. Okay, well, no, this doesn't belong here either. Good Lord, no. This is Moon of Cobra by William Cox. Look at that cover. That is just incredible. And this is obviously a Western, so we're going to put that aside because we've got June on the Range coming right up. If I don't end up reading only Louis L'Amour, which looks depressingly likely, then I will be reading everybody. I'm feeling an enormous pull by the forces of the universe to read only Louis L'Amour for June on the Range. Crazy. Absolutely crazy, considering that he's the only Western novelist that I've read a lot of already, that I had read a lot of before June on the Range rode into town. There are plenty of Western authors that I haven't read at all, barely read at all. Okay, here we have Jim Steele. This is Gold Train. This is Jim Steele, number 5, by Jess Cody. This will certainly work for June on the Range, but considering this cover, them crawling, for some reason crawling on the outside of the train, and also because of that number 5, this might also do for Garb August. And then the last thing that we'll do, speaking of Garb August, this is The Secret of the Lona. This is Dr. Bones by Stephen Lee. And I'm thinking this is Garb August. Definitely. No, I'm not having any feeling of any of the fates colluding to make me read a certain thing for Garb August. I definitely have that feeling for June on the Range, that I'm going to read just Louis L'Amour, despite the fact that I have all these Westerns. But we shall see. And that'll be long over by the time most of you watch this video. So, but anyway, that is bookcase number 3, shelf number 1, subsection B, and we got through it all. So that is done. We will move on next time to shelf number 2, to shelf number 2 of bookcase number 3. And then we'll see how fast we get through that. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.